Chapter 8. Looking Inward. Understandably, it was several days before Pidge felt comfortable enough to approach Lazanne. She was sitting alone in the lounge again, working on a project that involved some very peculiar diagrams, and didn't seem sorry to be interrupted. "Good day, Pidge," the Galra woman said mildly, drawing an odd vector in one diagram with a fingernail, and then frowning at it as though it had offended her. "Come distract me from this. I'm trying to find a way to disrupt Robeast's inner workings, and it's fighting me. Motri tells me that you've an important question to ask, but he wouldn't tell me what it was." Pidge walked over and peered curiously at the work on the screen. Some of it she recognized as machine schematics and circuit diagrams, but the rest was an incomprehensible hash of weird symbols. She said uncertainly. "You said a while ago that my gift for understanding alien technology was like your magic. Can you teach me enough to put a dent in the enemy?" Lazanne gave her a very surprised look. She turned in her seat to look Pidge directly in the eyes and just stared, motionless and silent, for nearly a minute. Finally, she blinked and shook her head. "I don't know." "But—" Pidge protested, but Lazanne raised a hand. "One," Lazanne said, lifting a purple finger, "you are human, not Galra. From what I was able to learn, your people study the physical sciences almost exclusively. Etherics are either ridiculed or ignored by the scientific community. They're the province of fiction and fantasy on your world. This tells me that the talent for them in your people is either weak or vanishingly rare. We've been breeding to enhance those traits in ourselves for tens of thousands of years. 2, you've come to this very late. You've got the potential, I've seen enough to know that, but we start learning those lessons from very early on in our childhood. 3, your talents are at their strongest exactly where mine fail. My mother encouraged me to take up cybernetics as my main course of study. She idolized Hagar, but I was able to learn only enough to reverse the process. Machines are dead things of ceramic and metal. I have always resonated with living things far more effectively than machines. I can get an AI to listen to me, but that's about it. Those are almost alive." Pidge sagged in disappointment. "So you can't help, then?" "I can't teach you how to move yourself through the aether, no." Lazanne tapped a thumbnail against one tooth thoughtfully. "But I can give you some basic exercises that might, just might, allow you to build something that will. I've been told that you had one of those little drones, right? You gave it a name." "Rover. It saved me from Sendak's second-in-command. It's broken, though." Lazanne gave her a narrow look. "It shouldn't have done that. Drones have no loyalty programming. They have no autonomy at all. The concept of friendship does not apply to them, and it should not have been actively helping you. Did you make any significant changes in its programming?" "No," Pidge said. "I mean, I fiddled around with it a little to enhance its sensory suite and range, but that's all." "And yet it gave the life that it did not have to save yours." Lazanne's expression grew decisive. "Show me that drone." A little time later in the lab, Lazanne held the small dead machine in her hands, peering intently at its innards. "Rover was pretty banged up," Pidge said sadly. "I fixed it up as well as I could, but something's wrong in there, and I can't get it to reactivate." "This was alive," Lazanne said softly. "It was alive, and it loved you." "It was?" Pidge stared in amazement at the drone. "It did?" "Machine life. The only other known examples of it are the lions and this ship. That big green beast has probably been studying you since you found it." Lazanne smiled sadly and placed the drone back down on the table gently. "Ye gods, what a privilege, and what a burden. I wonder if I dare give you the keys to unlock yourself." "I can't teach you a thing." Pidge slammed her hands down on the table. "What? What are you talking about?" "You gave life to a disposable security machine," Lazanne said, pointing at the drone. "You probably haven't been able to speak to the castle since it's already alive and bonded to the princess, and it will heed no one else's will unless she gives them that privilege herself. Have you worked with any other Galra-made robot?
One of the sentries, Pidge admitted. It was stubborn, though, and it took a while to get it to talk.
Lazanne shot her a sharp look and leaned both hands on the table. You got a sentry to talk. How long did you work on it?
About 15-20 minutes.
Lazanne rubbed at her eyes. Pidge, the sentries are guaranteed unhackable. That's why the armies use them. Whole civilizations have been trying to crack their code for centuries. You did it in less than half an hour. That's not genius, that's impossible.
That took Pidge aback. Do you think my bond with the lion is boosting it?
It's very possible. Lazanne sighed and muttered in a low voice. I have declared the Keshveg. I will not disdain any weapon that comes to my hand. I will, however, be very nervous about it for a while. Pidge, the first exercise that I will give you is this. You must learn to listen. That is the heart and core of magic. I've already been teaching you and the others how to do that with the team exercises. Sit in a darkened room and listen to the castle. Just listen, don't try to speak to it. Hear the energy flows, the mechanisms. Feel it from bow to stern in your own heart. Do it right and you won't need a map to find your way around the ship. You'll see it, shining in your mind like a jewel. Your first assignment, once you've managed that, is to use that technique to find out if there are any more glitches in the system or any more broken sentries in the basement. Play with those, if you like, but do not try to speak to the castle without Alura's permission. It may be programmed to strike out against anyone who tries to influence it in this way. It probably already knows you for a friend, but there are limits.
Gotcha, Pidge said, much encouraged, and then sobered. Will I be able to do anything for Rover?
Lazanne shook her head. No idea. Probably not. No witch has ever been able to return true life to the dead. Let it be a reminder to you that you must not waste what you awaken. Go and study.
Pidge turned to leave, but glanced back. What will happen if I do master this?
Lazanne spread her arms helplessly, but smiled. It's beyond my comprehension. I don't do machines very well, remember? I can service the simpler bits of a starship and run a home computer in a gene lab. I can certainly swear at an AI until it blushes, but I can't see how it thinks. For all I know, you'll steal whole armies of sentries at a time, or you'll be sitting in Voltron when some vital connection is made and you'll steal every ship in Zarkon's navy. Or you'll sneak into Hagar's lab and get it to turn against her. Do not consider anything to be impossible, because I'm not sure that anything truly is at this point. Why not? Become the goddess in the machine, Pidge, and never let anyone tell you to back down. Just remember the drone and the price of the drone, and that sometimes losing one life is losing 10 lives too many. Go and study. You have a long way to go before you're lining up sentries for dancing lessons.
Right, Pidge said, unable to quell a smile at that image. Her brother had once shown her an old video from one of his history courses of a group of people doing a rather odd dance. The thought of 100 Galra robots doing what was it called? The Macarena appealed to her. Then something else occurred to her. Just one more thing, Lazanne. Motri told me that I could, Blushing again, she leaned forward and whispered urgently into Lazanne's ear. Lazanne burst into peals of laughter. That naughty man! He's quite correct, I'm afraid, although don't try it on him. He's mine, and anyone trying to poach him away from me will meet with my wrath. You might want to carry a vial of strong sedative with you, just in case you have to use your feminine wiles on someone. It's far gentler to put the poor boy under rather than leaving him to pine after you. Quieter, too. My older sister loved to play that prank on the neighbors' boys, and guess who had to clean up after her? Pidge gave her an embarrassed grin and headed off to do some homework.
It was very late. It was probably also early, but Hunk was still having a little trouble with Altean time measurements and wasn't sure. Ticks or seconds, it didn't matter. Each one that passed was carrying him further from home. To distract himself, he wandered into the kitchen and ran up a few tanrook buns, then carried the steaming bowl out to the lounge to watch the stars. They were beautiful, shining like diamonds scattered over 1,000,000 miles of black silk, but none of them were his. He thought of his family, his future, and his current situation, and wondered if he'd ever be able to go home again. Sunk deep into his thoughts, it was some time before he realized that he wasn't alone. 2 very large, warm presences had come silently out of the shadows of the darkened lounge to sit down on either side of him, starlight glinting off of their scales and making their eyes shine like those of a cat's. Like very big, spiky, 6-eyed cats. Tilla whiffed at him softly. "Hey, guys," Hunk said in a quiet voice, reaching out to pat Soluk's foreleg. "I'll bet that you're even more homesick than I am right now, and a lot less comfortable. I just need a bed and a place to work. You guys need like 1,000 miles of grassland or something. And your pack. It's no fun being all alone out here, isn't it?" Soluk grunted and Tilla leaned down and licked Hunk's cheek, very gently. He rubbed the scales under her chin. "I bet your folks are just as upset as mine have to be right now. I've got this mental picture of my grandma, waving her cane at Voltron and yelling at him for kidnapping me. She'd do it, too. At least if you get to go home, you can stay there. I don't think that we've got that option." Soluk made an odd questioning sound, eyes gleaming like gems in the cold light of the stars. "It's not just fighting Zarkon," Hunk said. "Even if we do manage to take that guy down, we're going to be cleaning up bits and pieces of his empire for the rest of our lives. When we get too old to fight, we'll have to train new paladins, and they're going to spend their whole lives putting out fires too, and probably the ones that come after them. The real trick, though, will be keeping the whole universe from wiping out the Galra." Tilla rumbled and sniffed at his bowl of buns. Hunk passed her one, barely noticing what he was doing. It would be ironic, right? If Lazanne and Modri wound up being the only 2 left. It's happened to a lot of other folks, and the survivors are going to remember that. I never got better than a passing grade in history class, but I remember that there were a lot of times in our own history where that sort of thing happened. The meaner you are to the people you conquer, the worse the backlash is going to be. Nobody in power ever thinks about the consequences of being evil. A lot of innocent people are probably going to die because Zarkon's a 10,000-year-old jerk. Soluk hissed and vented a soft tuh. "I mean, I like Lazanne, and Modri's a neat guy, but I haven't met any other Galra who wasn't actively trying to kill me. I just hate that I'll probably never be able to find out if our friends are the only good ones. I really wish that we didn't have to fight them." Tilla heaved a huge, bacon-scented sigh and shifted, bringing one arm forward so that he could lean on it. Hunk did so, with a care for her sharp scales. "All I ever wanted to do was to be a good engineer. I didn't sign up to be a superhero. It's not as much fun as it looks, is it? I mean, don't get me wrong, the robots are awesome and it's great getting to meet whole new alien civilizations, but I really don't like getting shot at, and to tell you the truth, I don't like the odds. There is only one Voltron after all. I just wish I knew why Zarkon wants it so bad." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, and stared at the floor. "So bad that he spends 10 millennia killing other people's planets looking for it. What's he going to do with it anyway? He's already got like 1,000,000,000 huge battleships, and he's already the toughest guy on the block. He doesn't need Voltron anymore, so why does he want it so much?" Soluk grunted and lifted a paw, using a single claw tip to activate the nearby terminal. Hunk stared at the big dragon as he very delicately accessed a particular file, the contents of which caught his attention immediately. "Hey, that's stuff from home!" It was mostly Newsnet's articles, none of them recent, with a healthy scattering of movies, ebooks, scientific data, technical manuals, and, for some reason, a collection of platypus pictures. Hunk slid into the chair and began looking for dates. This is the stuff she downloaded when she delivered our messages to Earth. Wow, she was interested in everything, wasn't she? Tilla chirruped agreeably. "I mean, How to build your own portable power source is one thing, but traditional basket weaving techniques? Oh, here, pottery too. Somehow I don't see her playing in the mud much. Solok chuffed and tapped an icon. The article that came up startled Hunk into silence. Right there on the screen was a slightly blurry video loop of the Blue Lion, flying in wild circles over the Badlands. Wow, Hunk breathed, reading the headline. Giant cat robot spotted near Galaxy Garrison. Conspiracy theorists allege alien activity. No, it wasn't. Well, it was, sorta, but Lance was driving. Huh. He's gotten better at it since then. Other articles bubbled up on the screen at the touch of a button, and Hunk had a hard time keeping himself from bursting into tears. 3 students vanish from Galaxy Garrison, one headline screamed. Alien abduction possible. Student recently expelled from Galaxy Garrison also missing. Conspiracists allege him to be alien recruiter. Galaxy Garrison denies all accusations of alien activity. Families of missing students allege cover-up. Galaxy Garrison denies this. Families of missing students sue, demand information. Director of Galaxy Garrison threatened by grandmother of missing student is warned, bring my grandson back or there will be hell to pay. Hunk sniffled and smiled. Good old grandma. Hey, what's this? Alien ship arrives with messages from missing students. Insults director of Galaxy Garrison. Says secrecy is stupid and rude. Government refuses to release messages from missing students to newsnets. Hunk frowned. Hold on. She said that they left right after making the drop. How'd she know about this? Tilla grunted and tapped the screen, bringing up an article about a bunch of college students who had constructed a small but functional orbital satellite out of parts that they'd found in the basement. Apparently, the thing had been launched and tested without official permissions, and the local authorities weren't sure whether to give them all scholarships to a major science academy or a month or 2 in jail. Hunk snorted in amusement. I get it, they left a satellite. Well, I'd want to keep an eye on the place, too. Hey. Families of missing students make personal messages public. Public demands whole story. I bet they did. It's kind of neat getting your own media feeding frenzy. I've got to show this to the guys. Hunk tapped a button for more, but that was it. So what's your point, Solok? Solok collapsed the news articles, switching to a few pages of a comic book where a villain that bore a remarkable resemblance to Zarkon was posturing at his foes. Solok's claw tip tapped that image, bringing it up sharp and clear. Yeah, all right, Zarkon. What about him? Another tap of a claw brought up an article about a new street drug in Europe, one that gave its users a feeling of immortality and infinite power while spurring them to violent acts. There had been numerous murders already. Yeah, I heard about that stuff. It's insanely addictive, too, and they haven't had any luck in breaking the habit. Solok tapped the image of the greenish pills and then the image of the supervillain. Zarkon's an addict? It can't be to that stuff. Some creep in a lab right there on Earth synthesized it out of bad booze and furniture polish. Tella blew a raspberry in his ear. Solok brought up an image of a sunset over a tropical ocean. The blaze of golden light was a good enough clue. All right, sorry. The Galra are using quintessence as a power source, I get that. So he's taking it like it was a drug, then. He's a power junkie. The claw tapped again, bringing up a few stills from what seemed to be an old video game. Hey, I've played this one. My cousin has a huge collection of old RPGs, and he used to keep us kids riveted for hours while he played them. This one was... can't remember the name. Xeno something. That was the rat guy who betrayed the heroes because the bad guys offered to make him strong. Hunk trailed off, staring at the caption, which read, "It feels so good." Hunk shivered. I think I see. It feels really good to be that powerful if you've been weak before. Solok tapped the screen again, bringing up an article that Hunk recognized. Oh, this guy. That serial killer over in Florida. One of his victims survived, and she told police that he told her that he wasn't going to stop until someone killed him, and that the only thing that could kill him was something greater than he was. It was true, too. A train hit his car during a car chase and smeared him across a half-mile of track. Zarkon won't stop until we take him down, huh? Tilla churred. Solok bobbed his head and touched another control, bringing up a video clip of a speaker giving a lecture. The most dangerous individual in the world is an ordinary citizen who is suddenly no longer required to take no for an answer. Hunk swallowed hard, remembering certain names out of his own planet's history. Names that hadn't meant anything before their owners had come to power, and now were synonymous with unimaginable evil. Wow, so he's escalating, and Voltron's the key to that, and it's up to us to stop him before he wipes everything out, huh? Solok tapped the screen again, and a man in a black mask said, "It is your destiny." "Thanks." Hunk scrubbed wearily at his eyes. "I just wish that I knew why I was chosen for this job." Solok shrugged. Tilla tapped the screen, bringing up an article. The headline read, "Local firehouse turns down offer of volunteer work from Clown College. Fire chief says, 'Thanks, but no thanks.'" Hunk laughed and patted her elbow. "You're right. There's nobody else I'd trust to do this work. Thanks, guys. I'll try to get some sleep now." Tilla leaned down and nibbled his hair affectionately, and Solok rumbled. Yawning, Hunk wandered off to bed. Keith was breathing hard and trying to concentrate. His foe was fast and agile, and had the advantage where it came to mobility and reach. He already had the measure of her best trick, though. She liked to make 4 or 5 short jumps, then 1 or 2 longer jumps at odd angles, and then jump behind him. Often right behind him, inside the reach of his Bayard where he couldn't hit her. Each short jump took about a half second, almost 3/4 of a second for the longer ones, and he could usually infer her future positions from her previous ones. Usually. All right, maybe half the time. All thought ceased when Lance crashed into him again, knocking them both to the floor in a protesting heap. "What the heck are you doing, Lance?" Keith shouted, giving his team a bonk on the helmet with the butt of his Bayard. "Trying to win this fight!" Lance snapped back, trying to punch back and missing. "You're the one who's not looking where he's going. I thought you were supposed to be good at this." "I can see where I'm going just fine, you idiot. You're the one who's flailing around like a monkey." "That's enough, you two," Shiro sighed. "For the 5th time, get up and stop yelling at each other. Are you feeling up to another try, Lazanne?" Lazanne was leaning against the far wall, watching the fun, tapping one end of her quarterstaff on the floor. "I should be. These two seem to be determined to do my work as well as theirs." The team had progressed far enough into their training so that each of them could hold their own against her individually. Facing her talents in pairs had yielded mixed results. Keith and Lance especially had found it difficult to work together and had spent most of their turn on the floor fighting each other. Shiro had had his hands full breaking up squabbles between them all morning and had just about had enough. "Keith, you're too used to acting alone. Lance, stop trying to one-up him all the time. Try again." Lazanne chuckled and pushed away from the wall, spinning the staff idly around her hand. "They remind me of my brothers when we were little, always shoving each other around to see who was the strongest. The noise was deafening at times. You like to compete, boys? Then compete. Find a pattern and challenge each other to keep it up as long as you can. Compete with me. Who will tire out first? I want to win too. I am the hunter. You are a pair of packmates who have become separated from your fellows, and the both of you look very tasty to me right now." She bared her teeth in a ferocious grin that would have scared a wolf up a tree. "Act together, or I shall have you both for lunch." Both of them flinched at her fierce expression, but her words helped. Numerous sessions of standing in the dark and learning to move as one had built up some useful habits, and having a common enemy was a mighty spur toward unity. Lazanne was pure predator, swaying slowly like an angry cobra. Her quarterstaff smacked firmly into her free hand, and then she charged. The paladins reacted instantly, Keith parrying her strike while Lance sprinted back into one side, looking for room to fire his Bayard. She flicked out as Lance fired, reappearing on his left hand with staff upraised, but Keith was already there, smashing the weapon aside. She blinked out again before the blade could touch her, reappeared behind Keith. Lance hurled himself forward, blocking her again with the butt of his weapon.
Again she was gone, reappearing on the far side of the room, and she hurled her staff like a javelin directly at Lance's face. Keith danced back, deflecting the rod, which launched itself toward the ceiling like a rocket. Lazanne was gone again, then back, catching her staff on the fly. She'd only just touched the floor again when Lance cannoned into her, knocking the staff from her hand and her body to the floor. She might have bitten him in the heat of the moment, but the sword point aimed between her eyes stopped that, and so did the applause and cheers from Hunk, Pidge, and Shiro. Lazanne let out a hissing breath and a rueful laugh, pushing the sword aside with a forefinger. "I yield." "Well done. Lance, I said that I'll yield, hands off. There's nothing there for you, anyway." Lance realized that he had both hands on her chest, blushed furiously, and stood up. "Sorry." "Not at all." She got up, rubbing at her back, and nodded to Keith, who was trying to get his breath back. "Much better. Keep that up and there won't be much that will get past you. Want to try it again, or will you let Pidge and Shiro have a turn?" Keith shook his head. His arms hurt from his exertions, the long muscles in his legs were quivering. He definitely had bruises from tripping over Lance, and he would have traded Texas for a drink of water right now. "I need a break," he rasped, putting his Bayard away. "You?" "I could stand to take a breather," Lance said, sagging a bit and rubbing at one shoulder. "Maybe I should strap pillows all over you next time we do this. Hitting you is like hitting a brick." "If it keeps your 10-ton butt from denting my armor, then fine," Keith retorted, but his heart wasn't in it. "Over to you, guys." Pidge bounced up eagerly, followed by Shiro. Pidge had taken to these exercises much more easily than Lance and Keith had, and paired well with everybody. Shiro trained with grim attention to every detail. Having suffered at the hands of the Druids, he very much wanted to be able to face them again without risking recapture. Lazanne saw that determination in his face and smiled. "You are of the pack," she said quietly. "You have become separated from the others and are in my territory. I shall have your flesh to feed to my egglings." Pidge grinned at her and drew her Bayard, the brief emerald force blade snapping into being around her hand. "Nope." Shiro merely smiled, sliding into a frighting crouch and readying his battle arm. Lazanne flashed them a predatory smile and burst into motion, darting to the left in an attempt to flank them. She'd noted that the group was predominantly right-handed and often tried to take advantage of that. All of the paladins had bruises from learning that the hard way. Pidge's Bayard became a grappling hook that would have tripped her up if she hadn't vanished mid-stride. Shiro was already turning to where he knew she would appear. He had felt the etheric waves of the transition against his nerves like a puff of wind, and felt the pressure of the return burst over... there. His arm blocked the strike that would have knocked Pidge flat, and he drove his fist directly at Lazanne's face. She vanished before he could connect, of course, ducking behind him, but Pidge was already there, guarding his back. Lazanne was forced to leap over a slash that would have shattered her knee, and forced again to teleport to dodge a blow from Shiro. She came out again at a bad angle a few yards to the left, but nonetheless landed a glancing blow on Shiro's shoulder before having to flick out again. Shiro barely noticed the impact and spun around to meet her again, knocking the staff out of Lazanne's hands. Pidge's Bayard hissed out again, this time tangling up in Lazanne's legs and sending her tumbling with a startled squawk. They had her pinned to the floor in seconds. "Yield," Shiro growled. "I yield," Lazanne panted. "Well done. You're getting better at spotting me. Gah! And I'm tired enough to make mistakes, which Pidge is all too good at spotting. Let me up, please. I'm going to be as stiff as a plank next morning from all of this as it is." Pidge giggled. "Us too. At least it's all for a good cause. What does a battle between witches look like?" Lazanne snorted, pulling herself up into a sitting position. "They're rare. Hagar won't permit rivals to her power. They're also very noisy. They tend to leave holes in the walls and furniture, and they're short. Throwing around lightning bolts takes a significant amount of effort, so the combatants don't waste time toying with each other." "The Druids took their time with me," Shiro said. "I remember that one of them took a turn with me in the arena. I didn't do well." "You're not a witch, and the Druids enjoy playing with their prey." Lazanne pushed herself to her feet, swaying slightly and propping herself against Shiro's shoulder. "Vile things, really. Evil as anything, just ask them." "Oh,
No more training today, people. You've gone and worn me out. Are you okay? Hunk asked, giving her a concerned look. Lazanne smiled fondly at him, but she was obviously weary. I just need a nap. Take the afternoon off, paladins, and exult in your improving skills. Perhaps tomorrow we'll try this in trios, or as a full team effort. Ah! Or I could throw a lightning bolt or two just to see you jump. I'm looking forward to it, Shiro said. Go and rest. Lazanne nodded and wandered out of the room. The paladins followed suit, shucking off their armor with considerable relief, and heading to the lounge to sit and discuss their progress. They found the room already occupied by their housemates, but that was all right. Tilla and Solok had made it very clear shortly after their arrival that they required a good brushing at least twice a week, and that the opposable thumb-possessing upright bipeds of the house had the privilege of administering to that duty. Lazanne and Modri usually took care of that, but this time Coran and Allura had been coaxed into helping. Modri and Coran were scrubbing vigorously at Solok's shoulders, while Allura polished the small, delicate spines above Tilla's eyes and laughed when the big reptiloid licked her face. Lovely creatures, absolutely lovely, Coran was saying. My grandfather used to visit San Pedro in the molting season just to tickle these big lads when they shed their old scales. He had a special set of brushes for that trip, and the dragons would all line up for a good scrub. Kept him busy for days. Understandably, it wasn't a good idea to arm wrestle the old man. And of course he brought back the shed scales to make light armor for the castle guards. Very fashionable to have a dragon scale jerkin in those days. Light, durable, stylish, and bulletproof. I remember that, Allura said, scrubbing beneath Tilla's chin. Father's guards were very proud of them and were very careful to keep the shoulder spikes properly sharp. I stole one from the captain of the guard once and ran around the castle all day wearing it. His had the best cape, you see. Capes are nice to look at, I suppose, Modri murmured. Some of my commanders liked to wear them on special occasions. The one time I was forced into putting one on, I could barely move without the miserable thing getting snagged on something, including my dress boots. Almost tipped me into the punch bowl at a party. Coran patted Solok's nose and tugged his mustache. Lack of practice. Why, my own uncle... Lance nudged Shiro in the ribs with a smirk. Maybe we should get some capes to go with our armor. It'd look cool, wouldn't it? And it would tell the whole universe that we're officially superheroes. Maybe I'll get a cape. Shiro shook his head and thumped down on a couch. And give some Galra soldier something to grab you by? Bad idea. Capes are for show. And you get sucked into jet engines a lot, Hunk put in, sitting down next to him. No thanks. We don't need them to look like superheroes anyway, because nobody's got armor like ours. There's nowhere to attach a cape on them anyway. There was a trill of laughter from Allura. Really? I didn't know you could do that. After that much Numbville, he certainly could, Coran said, waving his brush at her. It took 3 hours to untangle him from the chandelier, and the server drone was never quite the same afterwards. Talented man was my uncle. Not very bright, but talented. Keith and the others sat down with a long sigh. The comic books and vids don't talk about this part of it much. The training, I mean, unless it's important to the plot. They just come on the scene with their mystic arts or whatever, and fancy weapons, do a few cool moves to win the battle, and vanish into the sunset. And everybody cheers and dances in the street, Shiro snorted. I've always wondered who cleans up the messes after all those epic battles. Speaking of mystic arts, Pidge, how are you coming along with those? Pidge hummed and leaned forward, ignoring Lance's skeptical, I can feel the whole ship now. It's easier if I don't concentrate too hard, as weird as that sounds. I can see the green lion the clearest, but she won't talk to me yet. I'm not going to push it, since the ship's AI doesn't really approve of what I'm doing. It's like Allura's father is still in there somehow, sort of. He'll put up with me looking around because I'm a paladin, but he'll only work the important systems for her. My own computer's a lot easier to make contact with, and some of the Galra stuff that I've had for a while. Might want to focus on those more than the castle, then. I still like the idea of you taking over the sentries for us good guys, Hunk said. Shiro nodded. Yeah, me too. If you can sweet-talk a ship's AI into telling you things, it would make our work a lot easier. Pidge giggled. Well, if I can't do that, Modri told me something that might work. He says that if we catch one of those guys and hold him down, all I have to do to get him to spill the beans is this. She reached out and dug her fingers into Keith's dark hair, rubbing him lightly behind the ears. Lance snickered at Keith's startled expression. That's it? Apparently. I'm not sure if it'll actually work.
I think it has to do with their mating ritual, since there are some really big emotional triggers involved.
Feels kinda nice,
Keith muttered mistily, a vague, unfocused smile on his face. They stared at him. Pidge, who had seen that expression before, although not on Keith, snatched her hands back. All right, I'm officially weirded out now. Lance lunged forward and dug his hands into Keith's hair. I've gotta try that. Talk, Keith, did you or did you not cheat on that test last year? The answer he got was a whack across the nose that knocked him off of the couch. Quit that, you stupid jerk, Keith snapped. Ow, Lance yelped, clutching at his face. How come you didn't hit her? She's cute, Keith said, pointing at Pidge. You're not. You're also a... Pidge gave him a puzzled look. Since when did you start thinking I was cute? You guys forget that I'm a girl half the time. Keith opened his mouth to reply, stopped, looked very confused, and then rubbed at his eyes. Crap, I've got to go lie down. See you later. Pidge stared at his retreating form, stared at her hands, and then stated, Really weirded out right now. I've got to go wash these. Lance, Shiro, and Hunk watched them go, then shared a puzzled look. He doesn't look like a purple werewolf, Lance said. Much? Nah, he looks like something out of a 70s cartoon, Hunk agreed. I've known him since he was little, Shiro said. He's not a Galra. Maybe he just likes it? The others shrugged and turned the discussion over to other topics. Modri, however, wasn't so sure. His hearing was naturally excellent given the size of his ears, and he had also seen the dreamy look in Keith's eyes. Still, he kept his mouth shut and his hands busy until Solocantilla had been properly polished before making his way up to the comfortable apartment that he and Lazanne shared. Definitely a step up in the world there, he mused. The gracefully appointed room was at least 3 times the size of the officer's cabin on his old battleship, and it was even more luxurious than the captain's bunk on Lazanne's ship. No luxury could possibly be greater than the sight of Lazanne herself, sprawled in a tangle of blankets and pillows, fast asleep. He didn't have the heart to disturb her, so he made himself comfortable on the carpet next to the bed with one of the log books that she'd been able to salvage from the Chimera's databanks before it had blown. After a time, her hand slid out from beneath the sheets to curl around his ear, and he sighed, leaning into her caress. Modri, she murmured blearily. Was there something? An observation only, and a question, he replied, brushing his fingers over the fine velvet on the back of her hand, and then described the odd discussion that the paladins had had earlier. Is that possible? There was a soft, feral growl from beneath the blankets. Lazanne began to swear, a low-voiced litany of foul words from several different worlds. Gernuch, she grumbled. Salput vad nix. Thas. Halbanalux. Char carad. Spaff. Sola tut dex carbol. Quiznik. She shifted, tugging gently on his ear. It might be. It wouldn't be the first time, after all. Belgium, I say. Modri winced at her vile language. I know. Is there any way to be sure? Not without a fully equipped gene lab and at least 2 known samples. Damn. Well, I'll keep an eye on it. If nothing else, it'd be a fine irony, wouldn't it? Lazanne sighed. It would certainly explain his reflexes and attitude. Modri nodded. If it is true, it's just as well that he's too young for anything more than a sibling bond. Just as well, really. If they'd both been just a little older... Now, wouldn't that have upset Pidge? There was a snort of wicked laughter from the bed, and her hand swatted him lightly over the head. Like we didn't have enough to worry about already. Go find me something to eat, Modri. Those proud warriors ran me ragged today, and I'm going to start gnawing on the mattress soon. Modri smiled, getting up. Yes, my lady. Shiro couldn't sleep. It happened now and again. It was mostly stress, he knew, and homesickness, and the sheer enormity of the task that he and the others had been given, plus a dose of good old-fashioned insomnia. Despite the efforts of the day, he simply couldn't get his tired mind to stop spinning.
Out of habit, he headed down to the training deck. Perhaps a little light exercise might warm up his muscles and ease his mind. He soon found that someone else had beaten him to it. He heard it first, a peculiar thudding that sounded almost like a heartbeat, much magnified and oddly metallic, and very familiar. The same sound, or almost, that the lions made while running over rocky terrain. Curious, he followed the sound into one of the smaller training rooms and found the answer to the mystery. The dragons had found a way to keep themselves fit. A large section of flooring had become a very large treadmill, and the two huge reptiloids were galloping side by side in perfect step, their 6 blue eyes meditative, their breathing coming in regular chuffs. They were magnificent to watch. They moved almost exactly like the lions did, with great powerful surges of shoulder and hip, exquisitely balanced and apparently unstoppable. It was astonishing, really, and he wondered what their bones were made of. They were as big as elephants and probably as heavy, but no elephant alive could do what these big fellows were doing. He spotted a bench pushed up against one wall and went over to sit on it, unwilling to leave. There was something soothing about the way the dragons were moving, and about their very presence. Shiro envied Lazanne a bit for having been able to attach Tilla and Soluk to her household. The best that your basic earthling could hope for was a big dog, or a wolf in certain rare cases. His father had kept an Akita, which had been both, sort of. He'd loved that bear-like hound. He was nodding off when a big scaly nose nudged his shoulder, and he looked blearily up into 6 large blue eyes. "Oh, hey, Tilla," he muttered. "Sorry, just a little lonely, I guess." Tilla made an odd little twittering noise and nudged him again, and he got up with a groan. He'd stiffened up and had to steady himself against her shoulder, lest he simply fall over. Soluk rumbled at him and jerked his huge head at a side door. Shiro nodded and followed, barely awake, into a room that he'd never noticed. Probably a private meditation space or something, his overtired mind told him, or at least it had been originally. Right now, the floor had been covered with a massive tangle of cushions and blankets, and even a few stolen mattresses. Tilla nudged him into the center of the room and pushed him down onto the heap before flopping down next to him. Shiro laughed softly. Tilla's belly scales were smooth and flat, and she radiated heat like a furnace. Soluk settled himself down with slightly more dignity, but the invitation was clear. Shiro considered the effort of walking back to his own quarters, and found that a Herculean task. Staying right here was a better idea, he thought, so he kicked off his boots and snuggled down. He was out like a light 2 seconds later. And dreamed. He knew he was dreaming too, which was a little strange, but it was only a vague observation, quickly forgotten, for he was standing among the stars. There were millions of them, hot and brilliant all around him, and a web of golden filaments connected to each one, like beaded lacework. Each thread was thin but strong, and branched off in thousands of different directions. It was beautiful. "What is this?" he whispered into the darkness of space. "Taemok," someone whispered back. Shiro blinked and looked around, but he was the only one present. I don't understand." "Look closer," he was told, and the stars spun around him, growing bigger until he could see the tiny spheres of planets circling them. Each planet was connected to its star and to each other by those filaments, only now they could be seen to be great ropes of golden force, comprised of millions of finer threads. "Closer," the whispering voice told him. He focused on one single world, and felt a deep pang of homesickness. It was Earth, shining like a gem inside its own thick network of golden lines, the tiny pale orb of the moon caught up within it as well. "Closer," he was told, and then he was standing on his own home ground. Just over that hill was his own family's house, but he couldn't see it from where he stood. It was nighttime, and in the moonlit shadows he could see the fine golden threads linking everything around him together, every leaf and blade of grass. He was a part of it too. "Yes," the voice told him. "All that lives is part of Tahemok. Feel it." And he could. The grass under his bare feet was cool and moist and so very alive. He could feel every tree, every animal and insect. Over the hill he could feel the shape of his family's house and the people sleeping within it. He could feel the nearby river and the rich variety of small life that swam in it, the city in the distance, and more. When he looked up at the moon, he could sense the scientific research station on it, and the stars themselves clamored with distant voices. And sudden silences. Lots of sudden silences, and those horrified him right down into the deepest levels of his being. He could see the gaping tears in the golden lacework of Tahemok, and recoiled from them. "Tahemok has an enemy," the voice murmured softly. "The enemy has tools of great strength." "How can I stop them?" Shiro asked. "Tahemok also has tools." The black lion was suddenly just there, looming over him in the moonlight, golden eyelights burning in the great metal head. Shiro realized that he was wearing his armor. "You are given this choice," the voice told him, and he realized that it was actually two voices speaking in perfect unison. "You will give your life to face the enemy, or the enemy will take that life from you." "I can't do it alone," Shiro said. "You are never alone." He could feel them then, the other lions and their paladins, asleep, dreaming, far and far away, and yet as near to him as the house over the hill. They are given the same choice. There will be other choices. All things that live are connected. Shiro saw his own connection to the lion, which bowed to him, opening its vast jaws to offer him its pilot's seat. He also saw a thick cord leading from the great beast's heart to some unimaginable destination in the stars. It was more like a chain, actually, and discolored at the far end. He laid a hand on one great metal fang in sympathy, and noticed that his own arm, the mechanical replacement that had been forced on him, had a similar thread leading up and away. Still tied to that creep. Can we break that? "The enemy seeks to take for itself the tools of Tahemok. Tahemok seeks to take for itself the tools of the enemy." "So it's all the same then?" Shiro asked. "It is the difference between being and not being. You are given the right to choose between them." He considered that for a time, and then made his choice. Shiro settled into the pilot's seat, and the lion carried him away.